Welcome to the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture here in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm Lee Riley, Program Associate with the Crop, Soil, and Environmental Science Department of the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. Thanks for joining us today for our 9th webinar in the Arkansas Conservation Partnership Series, funded by USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service in Arkansas, and hosted by the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Today's speaker is Katie Brantley from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Katie is going to tell us about small farm and urban ag opportunities. If you are watching live, you can submit your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Katie is the state urban conservationist for Arkansas NRCS. She's going to share how USDA NRCS has been increasing support for small scale and urban farmers across the country, including here in Arkansas. We will also learn about federal opportunities that could help your operation and improve conservation on your farm. Remember, if you have any questions, be sure to get them typed into the Q&A box, and we will try and answer as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Thanks so much, Lee. And I'd just like to thank the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture's Cooperative Extension Service for putting together this fantastic webinar series. I really hope if you've been able to tune in, it's been helpful for you, and I'm looking forward to sharing the information I have for you today. I wanted to start out with a bigger picture overview of United States Department of Agriculture. Not exactly sure our audience, so wanted to make sure we're all on the same page here. Hopefully you have heard of the Department of Agriculture. This is a federal department made up of 29 agencies and about 100,000 employees, serving the American people at more than 4,500 locations across the country and actually abroad as well. If you go down, this is not meant for you to study by any means, probably pretty hard for you to see, but this is the organizational chart of USDA. If you go down to that bottom line, we're organized at that level at mission areas. And if you go all the way over to one side, you can see the farm production and conservation mission area. That is where Natural Resources Conservation Service is housed. And you can see we have a couple of sister agencies there. We'll briefly mention a couple opportunities that they have for you as well. But I wanted to just get some context of kind of the differences between department overall and then agency level. So Natural Resources Conservation Service. We like to use NRCS. Like extension, we have mouthful names to describe ourselves, so we use a lot of acronyms. But NRCS began as the Soil Conservation Service in 1935. And this was in response to environmental degradation and massive loss of ag land that occurred during the Dust Bowl. And if you take a look at our mission currently, it has some similarities to that response to an environmental disaster, environmental issue. Our goals are to deliver conservation solutions so agricultural producers can protect their natural resources, really so that they can continue to farm. So there's that balance between natural resources conservation and farming. We do that through technical and financial assistance. All of our programs are voluntary and science-based. And there's, again, that balance between the benefits to the landowner and land manager and the environment and that land. We have approximately 2,300 service centers at more of that local level in communities nationwide. And here in Arkansas, we serve all 75 counties. So the bulk of what we do and how we really try to focus how we operate is conservation planning. This is meant to be a collaboration between potentially you as a customer and a conservation planner at that local level. This is a free service. And we like to start having a conversation with you, hearing about your goals, your objectives, what you're wanting to do on your operation, your farm, your pasture, your forestry land. And then listening to some of the issues that you might be having, especially related to your natural resources. That could be soil, water, animals, plants, air, energy. And part of that conversation, we're going to want to make sure we can go out with you to see it. We want to walk the land with you. We want to do a field visit, get to observe some of those issues that you've identified and that you'd like to try to tackle. And then we can try to recommend some conservation practices to address those natural resource concerns. Well, then through all of that process, we'll try to get to the point where we can develop a conservation plan for you. And that's where you're gonna uh, identify those resource concerns you want to work on, conservation practices that sound good to you to try to address those resource concerns, and then put those into a timeline that seems doable for you to be able to implement those. There's quite a few benefits that could come out of this conservation planning process and implementation of those conservation practices. Those could be addressing plant productivity and health, enhancing wildlife habitat, increasing irrigation water use efficiency, reducing soil erosion, and a big focus that we've had for a while now is improving soil health. We define that as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. And we like to utilize the principles of soil health to try to tackle improvements in soil health. Those are seen in this image here, minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing biodiversity across your farm and your operation, um, maximizing soil cover throughout the year, and then keeping living roots in the ground as long as possible. If you do have animals on your operation or want to incorporate those, that could be added in as a soil health principle as well. So that's a kind of the higher level of how we operate, what we do, how we've been functioning for a long time. But under the 2018 Farm Bill and under the current direction of our NRCS chief, Terry Cosby, urban ag has become a priority. So we're committed to determining as an agency how we can better serve our urban ag producers, and we're working to evaluate our options within our agency authorities. I will say we are still very much in the process of tackling all of these goals, but we have made some progress that I'll make sure to discuss throughout the presentation today. But at the leadership level, this priority looks like increasing our service and outreach to urban communities, working to understand the needs in those communities, and then connecting those growers to our available programs and resources. We're working to expand our conservation tools and our make those actually be able to support and address the unique needs of an urban farmer and those urban communities nationwide. And then we're also reviewing conservation policies, practices, and activities to be able to adopt and customize those again to support an urban agriculture operation. Something we've also adjusted recently in the past couple years is how we can better describe land. And that's an important part of our conservation planning process. So we identify land uses as they're related to the human use of them. So that, especially with the focus on agriculture, so that could be cropland or forest land or pasture land or developed land if there's no ag on it. Um, we also have descriptors that are called land use modifiers, and those provide additional information and specificity about that land use. So that could look like grazed pasture or irrigated cropland. Now we've added a modifier called urban. So that could be used for urban cropland. And the goal of this is to try to capture, a landscape that might be predominated by residential use, commercial use, industrial, transportation. Those uses are going to influence your natural resources in a way that they might have different capabilities or ultimately some limitations. And then you're going to manage that agricultural system differently than, say, a larger rural cropland environment. There's not a qualifier related to size or human demographics. It's really just based on that land use and then its association with, in this case, developed land around it. And so those are going to interact differently than, again, some of our more large-scale conventional operations. So we're trying to incorporate this more into our planning process to help give our planners more information about what might be happening at that urban ag scale. And if you've worked with NRCS at all, I mentioned it before, our conservation practices, you might be familiar with with some of those that are used throughout our ag operations in the country. But we've also been trying to make some changes to those that might be more applicable to a smaller operation or even an urban operation. One that we've had for multiple years now that's quite popular in these situations are high tunnels. And so I'm going to go into a bit of detail about these because we usually get a lot of questions about high tunnels. Um, I've mentioned that as part of that planning process, you're wanting to address a resource concern. So you've identified a problem on your property and you're wanting to address it. So here you've been growing crops on your property and have realized you'd like to have those crops be grown longer into the season, extend that growing season. You're seeing some limitations based on climatic conditions, and you're wanting to overall improve your plant health. High tunnels can be a great tool for you. This sounds obvious, but this practice does apply to land capable of producing crops. I will explain that, meaning you want to make sure that this area actually is going to be a good site. Um, this is a passive system. There's no artificial light involved. So you need to make sure there's enough natural sunlight that can get into the growing space. If you put this tunnel there, you need to make sure there's good drainage. You test your soil. Extension has great resources and opportunities to do that. And do any amending that you might need based on those results to make sure you have good soil conditions for plant growth. Ideally, you've tried out growing in this space and can verify, yes, this does grow crops well. I would like to extend the growing season here using a high tunnel. It's also meant to demonstrate that you can't, this is not intended to serve as a greenhouse and that you'd have tables or benches or even hydroponics. It's meant for in-ground production in that natural soil profile. We also recommend that, or actually require that the tunnel not be on more than a 5% slope. It does have some benefit to have a very slight slope that can help with drainage and moving water away from your tunnel. Related to that, you want to make sure to avoid low areas on your property or even floodplains. You're not setting yourself up for success with, probably going to have some water intrusion and struggling growing in that space. As we've dealt more nationally and even in Arkansas in more urban environments, I'm now cautioning people to, if you're thinking about high tunnels, think about what you're allowed to do on your property. Talk with your local planning department early on, um, thinking about what are local ordinances or zoning requirements. Are you legally allowed to install a structure such as a high tunnel on your property? Let them know what your intentions are and what you're using it for. Make sure they go with it. Sometimes if there are limitations, sometimes it's as easy as just paying a small fee. You'll want to figure all that out early on so we don't get into any delays or complications down the road if you're actually going to work with NRCS on this. With NRCS, we do require that you use a manufactured kit as your high tunnel structure and install and operate it according to the manufacturer's recommendations. I've included a link here and you'll see it populate in the chat hopefully soon that helps explain a little bit more about high tunnels through a video. This is a national NRCS video and you can see a bit more about the specifications and construction of a tunnel through this video. So we do have Arkansas specific requirements. Those are available at your local field office. So when you talk to them and share that you might be interested in a high tunnel, they can provide the spec sheet for you. I've summarized some of them here, but we do require it to be a Gothic style tunnel. A lot of these are for additional structure, stability. This can be a really good way to shed water, to shed snow off of your roof, utilizing these more pointed structures. And the post spacing of these is 4 feet apart. The width can be between 10 and 30 feet. And if you do want a larger scale tunnel that's 24 plus feet wide, we do require that you use V trusses or W trusses. You can see in the image at the bottom, that's that additional layer of support and structure that looks kind of like V's or W's. We do recommend that you have a minimum of 6 feet in height at the roof line of the structure. And again, that's a minimum. You'll see a lot of different kits out there. If you search online, there's quite a few. And you want to think about what you're going to do in this tunnel and how you're going to use it. Are you wanting to grow pretty tall plants very close to the edges? Because you see this edges slope. And so if you start at 6 feet, you're getting lower and lower as you go to the edges. So you want to make sure, is that going to be enough room to grow the plants you want to grow? Are you wanting to get equipment in there? You're going to have to think about that for the size. So keep in mind how you're using this tunnel when you start thinking about the kit that you want to buy. You do need to have a minimum of 14 gauge metal for frame construction. And the sidewalls, you can see in the bottom picture, there's a bunched up plastic at the bottom of the side of the tunnel. Those are the sidewalls. And in this case, it looks like they roll down. But you can have either roll up or roll down sidewall curtains. These are critical for proper ventilation in your tunnel. Especially if you're growing in the summer, you're going to need to get cool down your tunnel. But even in the winter, you're going to capture a lot of humidity in that tunnel. So you'll need to get some airflow, get some breeze, get that humidity out of there too. So these are important. And then very standard for most of these kits is the 6 mil greenhouse grade UV resistant plastic. So make sure that that's part of the kit. And you can always call these manufacturers, go over the requirements and make sure that what you're looking at meets those requirements. They're happy to answer those questions. Wanted to mention a couple other things to think about if you're interested in a high tunnel. These are very intensive systems, and it's going to require a lot of management on your part. So you need to place this in a location that's easy to get to for you and that you're going to be able to visit every single day. Think about how you're orienting it. Is it easy to enter and exit? Are you going to be able to get the equipment that you want in and out, the plant materials, everything that you're going to be moving in and out? Are you going to be able to water your plants? You're creating an environment that does not receive rainwater anymore, so you have to have a water source for this system. So put it close to a water source and think about how you're going to irrigate your crops. We are in Arkansas. It gets hot in the summer. If you want to grow in the summer, you need to think about your ventilation. That sidewalls help get airflow in, but you might need additional ventilation. Some of these kits have vents, have those larger end wall openings. You can see in that bottom one where you can really open up the tunnel, get some breeze flowing through multiple directions, really cool it down a lot more quickly. If you are, again, wanting to grow in the summer, you are going to need shade cloth. So just go ahead and get a kit that includes shade cloth or add that to your order. These temperatures get very hot in the summer in these tunnels. It traps that heat. And so you're going to need to figure out how to cool that down. One last thing, if you're siting your tunnel, something to think about on your property, as I mentioned earlier, you're not adding additional lighting. This is a passive system. You're using sunlight. So you need to make sure that you're not going to have extra shade around your tunnel, and think about all seasons, all times of day. And so our general recommendation is if, for example, you have a 10-foot shed pretty close by, multiply that by 2. And so that would be 20 feet. Locate your tunnel 20 feet away. That should account for most of the shading that you're going to get. Again, different times of day, different times of year. That might sound like a lot. Maybe that's not the right tool for you, or maybe you don't have that kind of space. We have taken that into consideration as an agency, and there's a newer practice that we now offer. Small scale producers and urban producers have been using these for a long time, so I'm glad to see that we can now support them. But low tunnels are a nice tool that provides similar benefit on a much smaller scale. You can extend that growing season. You can protect your crops from rain, wind, cold for extra few degrees of temperature control. And they also can be used to eliminate pests, exclude pests from your system, at least sometimes some of the year if used correctly. So that, with that in mind, you can cover these with different types of material. You could use a plastic or a fabric or even a netting, like insect netting. You could do floating row covers or hoop supported covers like this one in the photo. Cover multiple rows of plants, just individual plants. There's a lot of flexibility with these. If you do want to use a frame or a hoop, we recommend metal, 9 to 10 gauge wire, electrical conduit, or a durable plastic like PVC, so they stay in place and have good structure. As the name implies, they are lower to the ground tool, so they're going to be less than 4 feet tall at the peak. And you can use these actually in a high tunnel to provide, if you're trying to reduce that pest pressure certain times of year, or if you're wanting to get an additional few degrees of protection from colder temperatures. Or you could use them over a raised bed or container gardens. So again, a lot more flexibility with these. We've also recognized that, especially now that we're working more in urban environments and urban spaces, not all soil is suitable for growing crops. So we've added another practice called raised beds for NRCS. The use of these is, again, addressing a resource concern. This is an unsuitable soil resource concern. So it's not really practical for you to regenerate your soil condition. Maybe you're on more gravel or construction debris in the city, or potentially a demolished house, and you're a little bit worried about that soil quality. So you have an unsuitable growing substrate. Or again, if it's more an urban environment, an older home was demolished, you could have a heavy metal concern, or other issues that could cause environmental or safety risks to you as a grower interacting with that soil or the crop. So to avoid all of that, put in a raised bed. You can put a barrier between that natural substrate or debris or whatever that potential contamination is, and then build up your raised bed, a framed bed, and then imported soil, compost, topsoil, growing medium. These will be between 6 and 24 inches tall, and you'll want to make sure that you're using a material to build them out that the imported material is safe for growing, and your construction of the raised beds is untreated chemicals or rot resistant lumber, something that's going to be safe for your crops. So another thing to think about, and that we've been starting to promote more as something we can help with, is how to capture water on your property. Maybe access to water, and especially in an urban environment, can be a bit more expensive. Or you're seeing a little bit of change in how water moves on your property, or if you have a high tunnel. I'll give an example. If you had a 1/2 inch of rain and it hit a 30-foot by 96-foot high tunnel, there would be approximately 900 gallons of water flowing off that roof. That's a decent amount of water that could end up going places maybe you don't want it to go. So first of all, when you do the high tunnel, you want to think about that and how water is going to move away from your tunnel. But one thing you could do is try to capture some of that through a rainwater catchment system. And we can help with that by building that out with you, giving you a design that could include those gutters to help collect that water as it sheds off the roof, the storage tank, a pump to direct it to be able to use it, and maybe a micro irrigation system back in your high tunnel, or to use it somewhere else on your farm. So that's a good option. I put this link here for building out a rainwater catchment system. Really great video to help explain what's involved, what you want to think about, and has some good design suggestions. So even if you wanted to try to do it yourself, this is a great video. You could probably make that work. There's a very small link at the bottom of this slide that's the companion document to that video, and I'm sure that's on that video link. If you've worked with NRCS at all in the past, you might be familiar with some of our other conservation practices. If not, we have dozens. We have quite a few to address all kinds of resource concerns on lots of different land types. But we've been working to make some changes to some or additions to some of our existing practices to better suit smaller spaces. Some of those include crop rotation, cover crops, mulching, compost facilities, pollinator plantings, micro irrigation systems, and then even pipelines to connect your water source to your irrigation. And how we've been changing some of those is to make them a little bit more appropriate for a smaller operation. To explain that a bit more, with each conservation practice, we have various what are called scenarios or options that can be selected that are best suited for certain operations or needs. For example, if you were interested in cover crops, you could select one species cover crop, multi-species cover crop, or you're an organic operation and you want organic cover crop. Those are historically have all been based on a per acre implementation unit. Now we have adjusted some of these options to be on a square foot basis, or 1 acre, less than 1 acre, quarter acre, capturing more of that smaller operation size. And then we've also added different options or scenarios that align with what's actually happening at a small farm. So an example here is for a compost facility, a small farm bins, a 3-bin composting facility. Or I talked earlier about low tunnels, having those now as a practice. We've in all of these edits and these changes that have been happening the past couple years, we're hoping that the changes that are also included are new rates for financial assistance, and we're hoping that those are better accounting for the intensity of the scale that's happening at that smaller operation, on the manual labor, the equipment being used, all what can go into that smaller operation, and those are supposed to be captured a little bit more accurately in those new options and scenarios. And all these conservation practices are available in a program we call the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, another acronym for you there. So NRCS provides producers with financial assistance through this program. And this financial assistance is intended to cover a part of the cost of implementing the conservation practices. It's a level of support for you if you're wanting to try these out or implement these. We accept applications throughout the year at your local office for this program. It is a competitive process, and that's based on multiple factors, but it does include addressing a resource concern through implementing a conservation practice. If you were to be selected for funding, you will enter into a contract with NRCS. So it's just good to be aware of that. And those contracts, on average, range between maybe 1 to 5 years. And then the payments are made after NRCS certifies completion of the practice. We will give you information as part of your contract, as part of your conservation plan folder, information on what's required to implement those correctly and be able to get them certified and completed. I wanted to give you some context. This comes up a lot. What are those financial assistance payments? We'll use the high tunnel example from earlier. So for this current year, what we call fiscal year 2024, our payments were by square foot for the high tunnels, $4.80 for the standard payment. And we cap those at a certain size. So that kind of equated to a 30 by 96 foot tunnel. So there would be financial assistance up until that point. And the costs associated with that financial assistance are supposed to try to capture, labor to install, the materials, buying the kit, and then some local mobilization. So that's just one example of what goes into those payments. The applicants for this program, to be eligible, you do need to be an agricultural producer. That means you own the land or rent the land and have some kind of interest in the products that are produced. You're producing ag products on that property. So that most of the time looks like you are the farmer. and so you're interested in applying for this program. You do need to have control of the land for the term of the proposed contract. So I mentioned sometimes those are 1 to 5 years. That's to make sure that you are going to be able to actually implement everything you're committing to in that contract. So know if you're an owner, sometimes it's easier. If you're a renter, make sure you talk to the owner and have a lease that includes that term. Eligible land, most of the time it looks like private land, but we can also serve on Indian or tribal land. And there are certain cases where publicly owned land might be eligible. This is something you'll just want to run through your specific case with your local field office. They'll be able to talk you through that more. And then finally, again, I've mentioned this multiple times, you have to address at least one resource concern. That's kind of the reason you're wanting to install those conservation practices. I want to just mention a couple other things that come up when people have questions about EQIP and that are particularly relevant if you're a smaller scale producer or an urban producer. There is no minimum agricultural income requirement to be able to participate in NRCS programs. And we're trying really hard to make sure size and location are not a barrier. So don't think that your operation is too small. Anyone who's producing food, fiber, livestock, or other ag products at the time that they apply, may actually be considered an ag producer. So again, encourage you to talk to that local field office, explain what you're doing and what you're hoping to achieve and on your particular operation. One other note, if you are interested in installing irrigation related practices, you do need to be able to verify that you've been irrigating for 2 out of the last 5 years. This is, again, partly because you want to make sure you are addressing a resource concern. You've been trying to irrigate with, say, a hose connected to your spigot, and it's really inefficient, wasting a lot of your time, wasting a lot of water. You'd like to try out a micro irrigation system. Just let them know that that's how you've been irrigating. You can write down, document, and really brief note to your local field office, and that's totally acceptable verification of prior irrigation. Something else to think about is that we have additional financial assistance available if you identify as a historically underserved producer. I will skim over this slide a little bit. There's a lot here, but I want to really highlight that there's a really fantastic guide that can help you understand a little bit more about what we mean by historically underserved. There's a QR code here, and then a link will be dropped into the chat. Please take a look at that if this seems like maybe a good fit for you. The main categories that we identify for historically underserved are a beginning farmer or rancher. That's someone who hasn't operated a farm for more than 10 consecutive years. Socially disadvantaged, it's a self-certification of socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. If you're a veteran who's also a beginning farmer or more of a recent veteran, and then there's an online tool to help you figure out if you might qualify as a limited resource farmer or rancher. So again, check out that guide, really, really helpful. And there's a companion website for it too. So if all that sounds great, but kind of like I've already done that, or I've even worked with you before with EQIP, what else do you have for me? Conservation stewardship program could be something to look into. This is if you want to take your level of conservation you've already done to another step, and expand upon what you're already doing. If you wanted to apply for conservation stewardship program or CSP, a conservation planner will work with you, a consultation with you to evaluate, again, what your current management systems are, what you're already doing with conservation, and the resources that you have on your land. And they'll calculate a stewardship threshold, which helps determine your eligibility. And then you'll work to tell them what you want to do to improve on what you're already doing, what additional conservation practices you might want to do, or through CSP, a lot of times we call those enhancements. And there's a robust list that they can go through with you as suggestions. This is a bit different in that it is a set 5-year contract. It's a longer term commitment. There is no minimum acreage requirement, but you do need to enroll your entire operation in the program. Financial assistance is 2 parts. It's a base payment. That's to really help you maintain that existing level of conservation on your land. And then practice payments that will be to support implementation of any new conservation and enhancements you're wanting to do. Unlike with EQIP, where you receive your payment after you've completed a practice, this one is just a set annual payment once a year for each of the 5 years of the contract. In summary, this program, CSP, is really a best fit for producers who already farm the land and are engaged in conservation efforts already on your farm. If you're wanting to expand existing conservation to get to a higher level environmental stewardship, it's a good fit. You do need to intend to plan to control that land, as in farm that land most of the time or own it for at least 5 years so that you can complete that contract. And you need to be comfortable with enrolling all of the land into the program. So you're not going to just focus on one field or one area. So there's a lot there. Breeze through quite a bit of it. It always feels overwhelming when we put it all in one presentation. So I wanted to direct you to some online resources where you could dig a little deeper on your own, take some time to explore some of what I've talked about. And you heard me mention a lot resource concerns. One of the online tools is a conservation concerns or resource concerns tool. This is through our farmers.gov platform. And you can explore based on the different categories, what types of resource concerns you might have on your property. And then you can kind of see what we end up calling them, what the NRCS jargon or lingo is. And that might help you actually feel a little bit better prepared to work with your local office. So you'll understand what they mean when they say some of these resource concerns. Backing up to just the main platform of the farmers.gov website, this is definitely our customer interfacing site with the goal of being a little bit more user-friendly. You know how government websites are, sometimes that's not the case, but I think this one does a decent job. You can start at the website, the front level, they have some stock questions to try to direct you to the resource within the website that might actually help solve whatever your problem you have or find the resource you're looking for. I will point out, just again, on that main homepage, there's already directs you to historically underserved. If you're a beginner farmer, how do you get started? Or even urban growers. So there's a lot of great sites here. Here's another screenshot from that main website for farmers.gov. You can see there's quite a diversity in the tools that they have. And I'd like to point out that this is not just NRCS related. There's multiple agencies resources on this website. So again, a great place to start if you're trying to learn more about what the government can offer you, particularly Department of Ag. They've created a specific website within web page within the whole site that's for small scale producers. Highly recommend checking that out. And then there's also a site that's geared towards helping you navigate how to operate at that local level. So finding your local service center. Those are usually within your county. Sometimes it might be the adjoining county that services you. But there's also some great references on this page that explain how to prepare for your site visit, what paperwork you might need to bring with you, what to expect to happen after that visit. Share some resources that other agencies have that might be of help to you, and even cooperative extension resources are all located on this Get Started page. And I'm going to briefly mention a few things with some of our sister agencies, especially because this Farm Service Agency or FSA is really important for that Get Started phase. You need to also be talking with them early on to be able to establish your farm record. This will allow you to get a farm number, and you'll get a map associated with that, and it allows you to be eligible for many of the financial assistance opportunities that FSA has, but also that NRCS has. So we do work closely with FSA to make sure that you have all that eligibility paperwork in and your farm established with them. They have their own opportunities. They have micro loans, farm storage facility loans. So that could look like you have a high tunnel. you're super productive, you're loving growing, but you have way more than you know what to do with. You're having to figure out, how do I market this? How do I distribute it? I need a little bit more time. I can't do it today. Maybe you need cold storage. That would work as a option for this facility loan, storage facility loan. So something to think about there. They have a disaster assistance program for crops that are not insured with like commodity crop operations. You can ask more about that at that local office. And then if you're wanting to get a bit more involved, share some insight, understand more how things work at FSA, you could inquire about their county committees. Again, that's at a county level, so more localized input there. Another one of our sister agencies is the Risk Management Agency, or RMA. This one is really a big focus of what they do is crop insurance. And they do have what's called a micro farm program. So it's definitely tailored for a smaller operation. You could look into that through their website. I've included that here with a QR code and a link. And they also have a searchable directory for crop insurance agents, and you can tell who might support, for example, a micro farm program. They also have a list of the contacts, local contacts on their website as well, because they don't have as many local service centers, or that's going to be a different office or a different contact. So if we think bigger scale, national level, a few other advancements that the department has made specifically to support urban ag or our community ag. They, as part of that priority in the 2018 Farm Bill, the Office of Urban Ag and Innovative Production was established. The mission of this office is to encourage and promote urban, indoor, and other emerging agricultural practices. They are trying to be an umbrella office to really help a lot of our agencies learn about resources, learn what the other agencies do, because a lot of times we don't even know that. So they're really helping wrangle all of us, provide us good information that we can then share to you. And they also, their website is a fantastic way to search and find out what all resources are available under all of USDA. And then they have two funding opportunities that office manages. They are the Urban Ag and Innovative Production grants. These are very highly competitive national grants. And then there's community compost and food waste reduction projects. These are cooperative agreements. You can read more about these at their Urban Ag website. But both of them are geared more for larger scale community projects. So a nonprofit or a local government, school, an entity like that would be the applicant for those. And again, you can see more about those on their website and also see examples. They have the lists of who has previously been awarded those, so you can understand more about what they're where they're targeting the funding. Lastly, I'd just like to mention, this is a program called the People's Garden. It was started under the Obama administration when our Department of Agriculture Secretary Vilsack, he was secretary then, and he's again secretary now. So he's trying to revitalize this program under his second term his second stint as a secretary. This is an opportunity to try to empower communities to participate in local food production. And a big part of it is trying to build community nationwide. So it's a nationwide network. You're joining with these others to as part of that official or formal community, which you can just do on the website. It's very easy, free to join, but it allows you to have access to webinars that they do, a lot of resources that are shared through that network. It's pretty neat to check out. The website can explain more about that. To be eligible for that, you need to you join that community. You're committing to growing using sustainable practices that benefit people and wildlife, and you have a teaching component to your garden. A lot of times these are small like community gardens, small farms that have a lot of interaction with their community, have people out, have school groups out, have community members working in the garden. There's a way that there's an interaction, there's a teaching component, making sure that people are understanding how to grow sustainably. It's a really neat program. I recommend you looking it up, and it's something that we're wanting to build on in Arkansas and maybe start working with some of these gardens more. So stay tuned on that one. And Lee, I feel like I've talked quite a bit. I'm hoping maybe there's some questions I could try to answer. I'll leave y'all with this slide with my contact information. Gonna put a plug in there again for farmers.gov. Please take a look at that website. Hopefully it can help explain more about NRCS and also our other agencies within USDA. And then if you're wanting a little bit more information on a regular basis, you could sign up through farmers.gov for email or even text message alerts. So yeah, I'll take any questions if some have come up.
Thanks, Katie. Really appreciate it. We did have a few questions. You had a wealth of information, and we had a few questions about hoop houses, and we've got some questions about equip.
Sure.
And if anybody that is interested in asking Katie any questions, we've still got a little time. Be sure to go ahead and get your questions into the Q&A box, and we will get started answering your questions. Katie, if you're ready, I am going to pull this document I've been putting together up. So early on, you talked about the size of the high tunnels being limited to 10 by 30. Is that true for urban growers? And is there an opportunity for perhaps smaller hoop houses? Is that 10 by 30 the max size, or can we have smaller in an urban setting?
Yeah, and
Or
so
I guess
that's
high tunnel, I called it a hoop house. Sorry, I'm showing my age maybe.
hoop house is just totally fine.
Okay.
As long as you don't call it a greenhouse, we're good.
Okay.
So yeah, so right now that's the range. So 10 feet wide would be the smallest, just because you're starting to get to a different type of structure at that point, and not kind of what we're familiar with. Would love some feedback though if someone has something in mind that they're wanting. We have added, I talked about those different options or scenarios. We have a small tunnel option that's no more than 600 square feet. So that might be a 10 by 60 tunnel. And yeah, so something to think about. There's a lot of range in the length. A lot of times that's what might change more so. 30 feet wide is pretty big. So 10 would definitely be more manageable, and then adjust your length accordingly for your space.
Great, thanks. So say someone has grading or drainage issues. Are there resources that you guys offer to help with that if they want to put in a high tunnel?
Yeah, we would ideally try to avoid a space where you already know there's issues, as it's probably not going to get better. So we'd really try to find a spot that's not already having problems. But we do have some practices that might be able to help. Again, just trying to divert water that's coming off the tunnel with some gutters, and then maybe trying to find an outlet for that. We do have a practice called underground outlets that we haven't utilized a whole lot, but has the potential in a high tunnel setting that would again help direct that water that might be more so falling off the tunnel and directed away. That's what we're trying to accomplish more if we've created a new concern based on putting that high tunnel in. But if you already have issues, it's something that you'll just have to talk to your local office about, and they'll have to go out there and see, and maybe there's a way to orient the tunnel differently, or try to find a slightly different space that might be a little bit better. Yeah, a little higher elevation or something like that. But again, think about if maybe a low tunnel might be a good way to start. If that's, I guess, another comment to that first question. If a high tunnel really does feel too big, low tunnel really could be a good option for season extension too. So keep those in mind.
Great. All right. What is NRCS working with any schools or environmental science courses in any of these identified urban communities for any of these projects?
We'd be interested. Yeah, I don't think there's a ton right now. We've had some community gardens interested and had some success with those. Schools, the biggest challenge with schools is the eligibility piece, as those operations are a bit more complicated, but it's doable, it's possible to figure that out. And so would love to hear more from whoever that is. Please reach out to me if that's something you're interested. Would love to follow up with you and see if we can make that work.
Great. And I shared Katie's email in the chat earlier, and be sure that that's included in the constant contact that goes out in the follow-up after this as well for anybody that needs to get in touch with her. I think that handles, oh no, we've got one more high tunnel question here. Is there potentially time to get low tunnels for this winter? Is it too late to already do that?
The short answer is yes, and I'll explain why. So we function on a fiscal year that ends at the end of September and starts in October. And so we've closed our application window or for this year, but we're accepting applications now for next year. You probably wouldn't be able to see those high tunnels actually on your property until past the winter, unfortunately. So a little late, but for this year. Yeah. I wish we could operate that quickly.
Great. I think for the time being, that's got our high tunnel and low tunnel questions covered.
Okay. And I'd like to put in a plug too. We have a great relationship with Cooperative Extension, and there's a new high tunnel educator and specialist that's been hired. I guess it's been about a year now. So I'd love to put a plug in for her position and how great and valuable she's been. I'm Tanya Ernst. So if you have questions for her, let me know. She's great with all the technical ins and outs of the high tunnels. So if you want her contact information, I'm sure you can Google it, but I'm also happy to share that with you too.
We had a question about rainwater catchment.
Okay.
And wanted to know if, and there was also a quote for a state health board, Arkansas code that stated that they needed to have an engineered water catchment. And they wanted to know if that's accurate or not, if you can shed any light on that.
I will say that we do have our engineers design the plans for one. I don't, that is more of an inside in NRCS level design. I don't know if that answers the question. I don't think it's this is not also related to food safety. That's another thing you would just need to think about if that's part of your operation, how you're going to use, I didn't mention that, but how you're going to use that rainwater. There's a really good guide that I could send out. I don't have it handy, but that explains kind of how you might want to keep food safety in mind with any water contamination issues from collecting it too. So I don't really think that answers the question, but how we design it is more like an internal engineer design from NRCS.
Great, thanks. So I think that's got our tunnels and rainwater catchment questions. And again, if anybody thinks of anything, if one of these questions prompts you to come up with another question, we've got a little bit of time left. Go ahead and get those in to the Q&A box, please.
And it's maybe ideal too, if anyone wants to reach out to me individually and talk through their personal situation, that's very possible too. So please feel free.
Great. So we've got some equip questions now. So can someone be eligible for an equip project on public lands if they're a tenant on public lands?
Yeah, the biggest thing with that is it's part of an actual ag operation, and you have some lease or some documentation from the owner, so from the city or whoever that is, that says, yes, you are allowed to farm here for X amount of years, that shows that you can complete that contract with that term. So those are the big qualifiers there. And working with FSA on your land eligibility, that's going to be a big piece. You'll have to show some of that documentation.
Okay. And we've got, I'm not sure if this was the same question twice or from a couple different people, but we've got a couple questions. Wanted to know if there's anything they can do to increase their EQIP ranking. I have some people that have been applying for quite a while and not gotten assistance. I wonder if you had any tips or insights.
That's a tricky one. And I think we're always reevaluating how we're handling that each year. This is in the weeds quite a bit, but we have quite a suite of different fund pools. And so an application will come in, it'll be for a certain type of operation, and then the local office will decide what fund pool they might be eligible. So maybe this one is for pasture, this one is for urban, this one is for a locally led fund pool. So that at that local level, that county level, they decide their priorities and what they want to divert some local funds to. And so there's a whole not separate fund pool that your application might be put into if it's eligible for that pool. So there's a lot of different directions that your application could go. That is not something you have to worry about. That's a field office thing, but we're always reevaluating that. We've gotten lucky to have quite a bit of funding come through to our agency through the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we have quite a bit of money right now. It's a really good time to keep trying and reevaluate your application with your field office. You're always welcome to tweak it and change it. And so that's something to talk to them about. If there's a way that maybe you could alter it a bit. This is prompting me to think about too, that I mentioned those local fund pools. Something I wanted to make sure to say in this presentation. We have opportunities and really value and want to hear your input as community members, as producers. And so we have what's called a locally led process, where we have locally led work groups. These are through the conservation districts. And it's a way to hear feedback from you and get it to NRCS to try to use that to reevaluate how we're prioritizing funding, how we're organizing how we do business, and technical assistance, financial assistance. So really encourage you to reach out and mention those locally led work groups to your local field office. The conservation districts are at the county level, and sometimes they are co-located with that local service center. And so if you can get on their mailing list, you can make sure you can have your voice heard at those local meetings and share. We don't always have small scale or urban producers attending those meetings. And so their voices aren't heard, and then their needs aren't included in the priorities for that local county. So we need you to participate in that so that we can make sure to elevate what you want to see and how you want money to be spent. So I'll just put a plug in there.
Great. That's a great way to get involved. Yeah. And with that, I think we're out of questions unless anybody wants to get a last minute question in.
Well, I'll just reiterate, please reach out. If you have any questions about reaching your local office, you can ask me too, and I can try to connect you. But if you have specific questions that you'd like to run past me, happy to answer.
Well, I want to thank you again, Katie. And again, Katie's email is in the chat currently, and we will be sending out a recording of this with contact information as well. Thank everyone very much for joining us today for the Arkansas Conservation Partnership Small Farm and Urban Ag Opportunities webinar. I want to thank Katie again for speaking to us, NRCS for funding this program, and my colleagues here at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service for producing and broadcasting this series. We hope you enjoyed our presentation.